Great. Welcome, everyone. We're just going to get started in a couple minutes, give people an opportunity to join. We have people joining from 14 countries, where at least 14 different countries were registered. People from 14 countries were registered for our event. So having participants all over the world. Give people a couple more minutes to join us. Welcome, everyone who's joined us. Hello, everyone who's just joined us. Welcome. Very nice to see so many familiar names. We're going to get started just very soon. Okay, I think in the interest of time, because we want to spend as much time as we can hearing from Yeshey and Lalrinpuii, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So welcome again. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to everyone. We have people joining from all over the world. So thank you for joining us today. We will be talking directly with our team members in Bhutan and northeastern India for this event put on by GeoHazards International titled Investing Locally to Stay Ahead of Disasters. So I'm actually first going to pass it over to Susan, our development director, who's going to walk us through the mechanics of today's program. Susan, please go ahead.
Thank you, Veronica, and welcome everyone. Thrilled to have you all with us. I'm sure most of you are experienced Zoomers, webinar people at this point, but just really briefly, because we would like to have this session be as interactive as possible, I want to tell you a little bit about how we're going to manage that interaction. During the presentation, all attendees are muted except for the panelists. And the best way for you as attendee to interact is through either the chat or the Q&A, which should be at the bottom of your screen. If you could use the chat for technical problems or to chat with other participants, that would be great. And then use the Q&A box for questions for our speakers. And Veronica and the panelists will go through a couple of questions to begin with, and then we'll open it up to your questions afterwards. So we'll try to be putting those together. And a pro tip that we have is on the Q&A, you can see the other Q&As, other questions that have been asked, and you can upvote them by clicking the thumbs up button. So then I know, Veronica and I know that we have a question that lots of people are interested in. So that would be great. So welcome, and I'll turn it back over to Veronica.
Thank you so much, Susan. And a special thank you to Susan because she really led the organization of this event. Thank you to all of you that just joined. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. We have people joining from all over the world. So thank you for being here. Just quickly, I'm going to give a little brief background as to what we're going to cover today. I will first give a very short background on GeoHazards International for those of you who are not familiar with GHI, with GeoHazards International. And then I'll also talk about the highlights of the past year. Then we'll move on to questions for the speakers, for Yeshey and Lalrinpuii, and then we'll open it up for questions. So today's event is actually the second in a series that we recently developed called Voices from the Field. And the purpose of the series is to allow participants to hear directly from our team members in the field and for you to be able to ask them questions. I think this has been kind of a silver lining of the pandemic. This was originally motivated because we couldn't have in-person events. So we were forced to do virtual events, but a really nice thing has been that we have now been able to feature speakers that we typically don't hear from in our in-person events. So this is a big plus and benefit for us. So GeoHazards International, we are a nonprofit. We were founded 30 years ago this year with headquarters in California. Our mission is to end preventable death and suffering from natural disasters in the world's most vulnerable community. And our approach is to focus on proactive, preventative measures. So we don't come in after a disaster. We don't do post-disaster work or recovery and reconstruction. We really try to get ahead of disasters. And we focus on applying the latest science and engineering throughout all our work. We aim to be a catalyst for long-lasting impacts. We like to think of our work as planting seeds so that we can ensure that efforts last beyond one single project or one single program. And throughout our existence, we've always had a strong emphasis on local engagement and presence. Throughout our 30 years, we've had experience in over 20 countries, and we currently have offices in 6 countries, including headquarters. So the other countries you see here, we have offices in Haiti and Dominican Republic, in India, and Nepal, and Bhutan. And the people you see here are country leads. These people oversee all the on-the-ground work in their respective countries and regions, and they oversee other staff members in their country. We started off as an earthquake-focused organization and also did some work on earthquake-related hazards such as landslides and tsunamis. But more recently have added climate-induced hazards to our work, mostly because we were hearing directly from the communities where we work that this was a huge concern. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of slides. Our team is quite diverse, international team with local perspectives. Actually, the majority of our staff members are from places where we work. So highlights over the past year. On the size of for operations, we've been focusing for the past year and a half on developing our strategic plan. We finalized it towards the end of last year, and now we're in implementation mode. We did receive a Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, federal forgivable loan, which was very helpful when COVID first hit and there was so much uncertainty. And despite all the COVID restrictions, we were able to continue work on all projects by adapting and modifying activities and scope as needed. And in fact, we were actually able to bring in new projects over the last year. One thing worth highlighting was, as I was mentioning before, expanding into climate change. We actually had our first project that included a climate focus and took place in southern India, funded by the World Bank this past year. And again, the motivation behind us expanding into climate-induced hazards is that we've been hearing the need that's expressed by local communities where we work, that they're facing threats of climate-induced hazards now. And seeing that we work in aspects such as safe practices for development and policies that consider risk, it feels almost irresponsible to not consider the climate hazards that communities are facing. We also managed to continue prioritizing local ownership. The photo you see here is of a project that we have in Bhutan, and you have Yeshey leading a meeting with the working group, with a government working group. This is an effort funded by Verisk and AIR worldwide. And the government for this project, like in many of our projects, they're key participants throughout the entire process of our projects and our programs. We also managed to maintain relationships with communities. Here's just one example of an engineer's training that took place in Amargati, Nepal. This is in Western Nepal. This was funded by the IFC Foundation. And so you see the training here, but as well as the woman you see in the top right corner is the deputy mayor of this municipality who's introducing the training. There's lots of examples of amazing teamwork that happened over the past year, but I think this particular example is one that's quite noteworthy. And this is for a project where we were conducting a rapid diagnosis for schools in Haiti, funded by the World Bank. Originally for this project, the entire team was supposed to conduct field work. But of course, with restrictions on travel, even within Haiti, this was not possible. So local team members each assessed schools in their area with remote technical support from team members in the United States and in Dominican Republic. And there were many challenges, including constant issues with internet connectivity, but the team was really amazing. They persisted and managed to conduct the work. I think this team was particularly inspiring and exemplary, given that we had an international team, but also I thought it was very special that we had Dominican Republic team member working with our Haiti staff members, as the Haiti and Dominican Republic relations are not typically so good. So I just found this particular example to be quite inspiring. Like many organizations, we also took some time to reflect on our organization in terms of how it pertains to equity, diversity, and inclusion. So we put together a working group of both board members and staff members and tried to do some reflection as to how can we improve in these aspects. And what you see here is a statement, a commitment of our a statement of our commitment of things that we want to do that, or we are doing now, as it pertains to equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we're kind of have a combination of both doing things internally, including looking at our policies and trying to look at the diversity of our staff and board, as well as externally looking at our communications and our programs. And we've had various really enriching conversations with our team as to brainstorming very concrete ways that we can emphasize or bring out more of making sure we integrate gender diversity and inclusion in our programs. So the next slide just gives one particular example of ways that we are trying to emphasize inclusion. This is a photo that you see. The photo you see here is of a classroom that's part of the Timon en Acción project in Haiti. Timon en Acción it's in Haitian Creole, means kids in action. This is funded by the Moran family. And photos of orphans and underprivileged kids that unfortunately we're told are treated quite differently. So they attend an afternoon school session after having to do household chores as a way to pay for their keep. And we were told the principal was really happy that they could be part of our youth program, and openly says this organization and funder are blessed as they care. Our understanding is that they're not typically included in a lot of programs for the school. And we've been doing a lot of work to better articulate what we do. So for example, we came up with 7 focus areas in terms of what our work entails, and also how we work. And so what you see on the right is kind of the 6 tenets describing our approach. And you can see all this new way of communicating of what we do and how we work in our new upgraded website and other outreach material. And all this is with the goal of better articulating the value and the importance of our work. So for me, the key takeaway for the past year is that our diverse and dedicated team is by far our greatest strength. And I would add to that our local team members were absolutely critical to our success in the past years. In some ways, COVID forced us to accelerate our progress in one of the key strategic goals in our strategic plan, which is to strengthen our international offices, invest in our local staff, and to further engage them in all operations. And today, I'm really happy that you'll be hearing from 2 local staff directly. So with that, I want to introduce you to our speakers, Yeshey, Lotay, and Lalrinpuii Tlau. Yeshey is joining us from his home country of Bhutan. He is based in the capital in Thimphu. And Lalrinpuii Tlau is joining us from Aizawl, India. So just give you a brief background on each of our speakers today. So Yeshey Lotay, he's a national coordinator for Bhutan and is based in the capital of Thimphu. He oversees all of our project activities in Bhutan and is involved in other projects in South Asia, including Nepal. Yeshey is a civil engineer experienced in planning, designing, supervising construction, and in training builders to build back better. He has been involved in GeoHazards international activities since we started work in Bhutan 10 years ago, and he joined our staff in 2019. Yeshey previously worked for the royal government of Bhutan as the first engineer who focused extensively on disaster management. He was the executive engineer in the Department of Disaster Management and chief engineer of the Construction Development Board. He assisted in recovery and reconstruction plans after earthquakes, assessed earthquake, flood, windstorm, glacial lake outburst flood risk, and coordinated the Falling Hazards Mitigation Initiative for Bhutan schools. He was a core technical engineer for post-earthquake building safety evaluation procedures and led a technical committee to plan the National Emergency Operations Center. Yeshey holds a master's in infrastructure management from Yokohama National University in Japan. He also has a bachelor's in engineering from Royal University of Bhutan and a diploma in civil engineering from Royal Bhutan Polytechnic. Welcome, Yeshey. So next we have Lalrinpuii Tlau. She is mitigation specialist based in Aizawl, India, in the state of Mizoram. Lalrinpuii supports comprehensive efforts to reduce extreme landslide and earthquake risk in her fast-growing city, for which our team developed a scenario of a plausible earthquake and ways to anticipate losses and ways to reduce anticipated losses. She now works with the Disaster Management and Rehabilitation Department and line departments of the government of Mizoram and Aizawl Municipal Corporation as they implement new regulations and a plan of action for landslide safety. The Indian National Disaster Management Authority has cited this work as a model for landslide-prone cities. She coordinates our work to strengthen the technical practice of local geologists, engineers, and planners. She has also conducted school safety trainings and answered calling questions on All India Radio Aizawl. We have been working in India since 2005 and in Aizawl since 2012. Lalrinpuii joined us soon after in 2013. Lalrinpuii holds a Master's of Social Science, a Master of Philosophy, and a Bachelor in English. So let's move on to the questions. So let's start with Lalrinpuii. So let's first talk about where you work, Lalrinpuii. Can you share some key characteristics of your region as well as prior and ongoing work? What are you excited about?
Thank you, Veronica. Hello, everyone. I'm Lalrinpuii Tlau. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. It's really nice to talk to you all. I'm based in Aizawl, the capital city of Mizoram, which is in the remote northeastern state of India. My city is highly prone to earthquake and landslides with limited connectivity by road and by air. Next slide, please. Around 400,000 of us live in this city in vulnerable buildings on very, very steep slopes, as you can see from this picture, where landslide is an annual problem. Next, please. Landslides that happen are natural, but most of the time, landslides are caused due to the way we excavate. We dig and excavate for constructions, causing problems to ourselves and our neighbors. The next slide shows an example of an excavation that cut under the foundation, which makes the building more vulnerable. And way back in 2013, GeoHazards International has developed a scenario of an earthquake striking Aizawl with inputs from international, national, and local experts. The scenario shows that the city will be cut off from the rest of India, and we will lose electricity, we will lose our water supply systems, communications, and you know, there will be building collapses, landslides, and all, and other essentials, and people will suffer badly, and we will be totally cut off from the rest of India. The scenario was an eye-opener for us, and we continued to work with the government and help develop a long-term risk mitigation plan called the Roadmap to Stability. In addition to this, we did a lot of training programs for students, geologists, engineers, doctors, and nurses. And these are exciting times because we have so much more to do and achieve in the roadmap. And that is a picture of the geology field school and the engineers training, where we have our experts teaching and guiding the local experts and building capacity. Over to you, back to you.
Thank you so much, Lalrinpuii. Okay, so why don't we move on to Yeshey? We'll ask the same question from Yeshey. So Yeshey, can you share key characteristics of your region as well as prior and ongoing work? What are you excited about?
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are joining from. Thank you, GeoHazards team, for organizing this webinar and giving me this opportunity to share my view from Bhutan. And to tell you about my region, as you can see from the map, Bhutan is located in the eastern Himalayan region, and it is a landlocked country, and we are surrounded by the Himalayan mountains. So I should say that Bhutan is prone to many natural hazards and disaster due to its location in the Himalayan region, and the entire country face a high level of earthquake risks, in addition to the threat from the fragile geologic conditions, steep terrains, and the climate effect, such as the glacial lake outburst flood, windstorms, and the flash floods, are some of the common hazards in Bhutan, as Rinpoche mentioned. Even the landslide is also a big problem in Bhutan in the monsoon season. But Bhutan has still many schools built with the unreinforced stone masonries and the brittle materials, which are very vulnerable to earthquake shaking. So to build these all schools or rebuild these all schools, it might take a long time actually, and we need a huge budget. But the children studying that needs a protection from the falling hazard in the classrooms in the event of earthquake. So we, the GHI, we have introduced the earthquake decks in Bhutan actually. This is the first model in collaboration with the Ministry of Education in Bhutan. So as you can see in the picture, the decks can withstand the heavy loads, and the two students can do the cover hole, which really enhance the safety of the classroom for the children studying that vulnerable structures. And we also work with the Department of Engineering Service and Department of Disaster Management. With the Applied Technology Council, we developed the ATC-20 field manual for both earthquake safety evaluation of buildings. And we also trained the local local engineers to assess the structural vulnerability using that manual before earthquake and after the earthquake. So that are some of the works that we have done. And with the help of our international experts, we also developed the National Action Plan for schools and hospitals. That are the two manuals that really kick up in Bhutan as a first national action plan for the earthquake safety. And that plan includes measures the risks that we reduce or prepare for the risks. So that really helps the school as well as the hospital in the earthquake initiative in Bhutan. So with that, we conducted the first national school preparedness drill in 2013. Since then, the nationwide mock drill has become the annual event in Bhutan, which is held in 21st September to remember the 2009 earthquake in the eastern Bhutan. So as an ongoing project in Bhutan, we are working on quantifying the buildings damage and the human loss from the two earthquake scenario for the Thimphu city. Thimphu city is a capital city of Bhutan, and with the funding and the technical support from AIR worldwide team. So this project will help the decision makers in Bhutan to evaluate the various mitigation measures to reduce the capital city's earthquake losses in the event. So this model will also help to plan for the efficient emergency response and the disaster relief in the event of earthquake. So that will really help in enhancing the capacity of the Thimphu city. So I'm also excited to work with the local engineers agencies in Bhutan to implement the result from the AI project phase 1 into the phase 2 project for the Thimphu city, which will really help to enhance the safety of the capital city and enhance a lot of works that we can do in the city. So thank you for asking this question.
Thank you so much, Yeshey. Yeah, I think what we're hearing from both you and Lalrinpuii is that, we are facing multiple hazards in these locations. And even though they're very different contexts, their own culture and their own setting, there are similarities, particular challenges of being remote with a limited access by road and air, and how important it is for these regions like this to be, especially prepared for disasters because you face a risk of extended isolation. So yeah, thank you both for your perspectives on that. Why don't we move on to the next question? So let's start with you, Yeshey, this time. What changes or progress do you see happening? Are there attitude shifts as well? And how do you see your role?
Oh, I think that's a very interesting question. I should say, especially for Bhutan, being the disaster word itself is a very new, long time ago. But with the disaster management awareness is increasing in the community, with the increasing disaster management programs in the country, that really helps to enhance the awareness among the community. As one of the disaster program in Bhutan, so we worked with the government engineers to develop the vulnerability checklist for the health facility as well as for school buildings. So we trained local engineers to work to make the assessment with the checklist. After the program, I think Ministry of Education conducted the nationwide program to assess the earthquake vulnerability of the school buildings, and all the assessments now are carried out by local engineers. So I think this is one of the greatest achievement of the knowledge transfer in this program from the international experts to the local officials in Bhutan. As you can see in the picture, the international experts are training the local engineers on the assessment. So therefore, our technical expertise in the countries are valued very high by the local engineers. So that's I think that's a very good news for us. And as a national coordinator in the country, so I coordinate with the local local agencies and implement the projects with their needs in the country. So even in the pandemic situation last year and this year, we are able to carry out our work without any delays, as we have our office in the country. And as we always do the regular meetings with the local officials to on the projects, as well as to explore their needs, even in this pandemic situation. So these are some of the roles that I do in the country with the international experts and with the local agencies in Bhutan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yeshey. Okay, why don't we ask the same question of Rinpooi? So Lalrinpuii, what changes or progress do you see happening? Are there attitude shifts as well? How do you see your role?
As I had said before, these are very exciting times. Since we started working here, Aizawl has made a lot of progress. Like any other city in India, we have the 1:50,000 scale maps, landslide hazard maps. And because we knew it's not enough, we made the 1:18,000 scale map, which you see here. And working with the Department of Geology from the university, in Mizoram University, the municipal corporation, and the government geology department, and the disaster management department, we made it even better to a 1:5,000 scale, which really helped with understanding landslide hazards and for controlling slope modifications. The next slide shows an example of Huntar landslide, which is a constant landslide which gets reactivated every year. And using the regulations and the map, the government has prohibited all new development in this area. And this may be small steps, but it is a big way of reducing landslide risk in Aizawl. And we are really thankful to Munich Ray for their funding to help us get the maps, because without their funding, we would not be able to do any of this, and it wouldn't have been possible. And for my role, I'm attached to the Department of Disaster Management, and my role is to bring people together to work long-term risk mitigations. Government may change, people may change, people gets transferred, and we have new people coming and going all the time, most in short term sometimes. And I have to work closely with whoever comes in to keep the focus of risk reduction. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yeah, those are all great perspectives. So I think what I'm hearing is, we're really facing a dynamic problem. So there's development, there's population growth, there's change in leadership, change in decision makers. So where does all that work that was being done before, where does it go? And so there's exacerbated hazards due to climate change or human activities such as excavations, as we were mentioning before. So I think this really underlies the importance of taking a long-term approach. And as part of that, I think what we were hearing from Lalrinpuii and from Yeshey, it's how important it is to also have a focus on social capital. And that meaning, like, who are the people and the groups and the networks that are going to implement measures long term. So it's not just about a great tool or a great product, it's about the process and improving or strengthening social capital. I guess, and in addition to that, I think one thing I wanted to point out as well, I think in the process of creating these scenarios and bringing together all these different groups, there was a lot of connecting of local experts who might have not typically worked together before. They might have been working in their own silos, and a lot of that really helps in creating relationships that doesn't just facilitate mitigation efforts, but also helps with response. Okay, so the last question that we're asking, and then we'll open it up for other questions. So we'll start with Yeshey. So Yeshey, what are the pressing next steps in your community, and what are you worried about?
Thank you. I think there's a lot of concerns as well as the pressing steps that we are taking in the country. So as I said before, we are very working on the AI project phase 1. So we are planning to incorporate the results from the AI project phase 1 into the Thimphu city disaster management plan. So to make it the realistic plan, so which will really help in saving the lives in the event of major disaster. So I should say that the local agency has a more sense of ownership in the project implemented in Bhutan, with the local officials' involvement from the beginning of the projects, as you can see from the picture, where we do the project working group meetings with the local officials. So we work together to complete the project and explore the other needs in the country, working with the local officials. So that are some of the things that we are taking in the project. So as I think even the Lalrinpuii mentioned, in the Aizawl, the landslide is another problem in India. It's not that even in Bhutan, as you know, that Bhutan is a landlocked country. So road is a principal mode of transport actually, and we are connected with our neighboring country India with road to the southern border, where we import most of our essential items. So that is a big concern actually. In the event of major disaster, if roads are damaged, then we will face a problem in importing the essential items from the neighboring countries. So, but with the help of the technical support from the BCG engineering, so we are working on currently we are working on the core seismic landslide susceptible maps for Bhutan along the transport corridor. So which will definitely help for Bhutan to know the landslide has creation of the multi-hazard map in the country. So at the moment, so we are working on it. And so another concern being located the Himalayan region. So I should say that as we all know, the world is getting warmer and the climate change is realistic actually. And the climate change is affecting Bhutan. Even though Bhutan do not contribute to climate change, I should say, since our country isn't just a carbon neutral, it's a carbon negative. So it's really proud for us that we are the carbon negative country in the world. So climate change is causing the flash floods, windstorm, landslide, as well as the glacial lake outburst flood. With the increasing of temperature, the glaciers are melting and receding rapidly in the region, which is a big concern for Bhutan hydropower generation. So Bhutan's development is highly dependent on the climate-sensitive sector, such as agriculture and hydropower are the main revenue generator for the country. So that's why that is a big concern for us. As you can see from the picture, the glaciers, the lakes are the one of the main source for the rivers in Bhutan, which really generates the hydropower, the green energy for the country. And also we export a lot of the hydropower electricity to neighboring countries. So therefore, let's work together to reduce the climate change and make our community safe and resilient. So I should say thank you to all.
Thank you so much, Yeshey. Very powerful statements. Okay, so let's ask the same question from Lalrinpuii. So Lalrinpuii, what are the pressing next steps in your community and what are you worried about?
Well, Aizawl is growing rapidly and the population is projected to become double by 2030. We have achieved a lot in the last 8 years we have worked here, but there is still so much more to do. And I feel that it is a race between our efforts and the next disastrous event. And with the effects of climate change, I worry that our pace is not enough. We will have to continue to work hard to influence more and more people to join the efforts to reduce risk in Aizawl. Thank you.
Thank you, Lalrinpuii, for that. Yeah, so I think what we're hearing is that, you know, although we've made a lot of progress and there's a lot to celebrate, there's still so much more work to do. And growing risk is by far outpacing mitigation efforts. And so I think one major challenge that we know exists is just having the money up front to pay for mitigation efforts. So we all know that it's way more cost effective to do something before a disaster to prevent not just from the cost perspective, but lives saved. But the issue, we still see it in the actual funding. Most of the funding still comes after disaster. So this is still a huge barrier that we faced for 30 years of our existence. And so we're trying to focus on trying to explore how can we accelerate the adoption, not just the adoption, but the funding of resilience measures prior to disasters, and trying to understand a little bit more of the drivers behind their barriers, and if there's any way we could try to address some of those and really work at the scale that we need to be working, given the gravity of growing risks that we're seeing worldwide. Before we move it on to questions from the audience, I wanted to just take a moment to thank our corporate partners. The organizations you see here provide either unrestricted funds or for projects in particular. And this is incredibly helpful for us. It helps us continue investing in communities where we work, especially between funded projects. So that's incredibly helpful in terms of keeping a long-term presence, which, I hope you heard today, is really important for the type of work that we do. I also want to thank our technical partners. A lot of the work that you saw today was in conjunction with various technical partners. I also want to thank our foundations that have supported us, individual donors, and all of you listening in today. Thank you for your support and for being here. And a special thank you to our speakers and our organizers today. So I think with that, I think we can move on to questions from our participants. So let me stop sharing my screen so I could see the questions. 1 second. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so the first question we have, what part of your activities have been impacted most due to COVID-19? Communication with local communities or collaboration with governments or other organizations? Oh, sorry, it continues on. Practicing your technologies or training to local communities on site or others? So, and there's a very kind note along with that, just being kind for the activities and wishing us health and safety. So thank you very much, Shoji-san. Yeshey or Lalrinpuii, do one of you want to first start with that question of what part of your activities have been most impacted due to COVID-19?
I'll take it. Okay. Thank you for the question. I think that's a very good question, I should say, in this pandemic situation. Yes, I think definitely many countries are affected with this COVID situation, but I should say that Bhutan is affected, but is impacted with this COVID situation in case of the communities as well as the works. But we have worked really hard. I should say the government of Bhutan as well as His Majesty, the King of Bhutan, has worked really hard for in fighting for the COVID-19 in the country. So we do not have much cases in the country, and also like the casualty is very less. I should say 1. So that's very minimum. And therefore, the activity that we carried out in the community, I said before, it's not that much affected since we have our local office in Bhutan, and we have to work closely with the local agencies, the local government in the country. So most of the work that we implemented in the country were not affected, and we could work very, there's no much delay in the works, and because of the government initiative in fighting the COVID-19 in the country. So I should say that we had really worked and collaborated with the government agencies in Bhutan in this COVID situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yeshey. Lalrinpuii, do you want to add anything from the experience in Aizawl in terms of COVID impacts?
So I would say Mizoram is one of the least affected states in the country, and that has to do with our government and our community. We live in a very close-knit community where we have each other's back through good or bad times. And the part of our activities that have been impacted most would be that we were not able to do our field works with our experts who have to come in from elsewhere, and we missed those kind of work where we do on ground field works. So as for our communication with local communities or the government, we have very, very good relationship with both local communities plus the government. So we do not have too much trouble. Even when we wanted to take on something during the pandemic, during lockdowns and all, we still get to finish and wrap up whatever we were supposed to do.
Thank you, Lalrinpuii. I just want to briefly add that I particularly found Aizawl and Bhutan overall to be so exemplary in the response to COVID. It was really inspirational, actually, as Lalrinpuii was saying. There's the community feeling and how everybody was really watching each other's back and really caring about the well-being of the entire community. I will also say that even though, of course, with COVID, it's been incredibly challenging. There's been a lot of challenges. We can't travel. A lot of our in-person events had to go virtual. We had to do a lot of adapting. But I think one thing is that, the COVID really, really showed how important it is to have science-informed action and to be proactive. And I think that's a lot of what we're really trying to promote and to encourage, is to thinking ahead of what disasters may happen and to act now instead of waiting after the fact. So that is one, from the messaging perspective, I think that is one one aspect that perhaps worldwide is better appreciated. Okay, so let's do another one. So what are some of the typical mitigation measures you deploy in your areas to manage these seasonal landslides? Given the population density, is relocation even an option? So this is a question for both of you. Do either of you want to start?
So I will take not some part of this. As I said before, the Bhutan has a lot of the landslide area, but not in the settlement as compared to the Aizawl in India. So most of our landslides are seasonal and is along the transport corridors. So in this case, we have a concerned agency who works on that along the transport corridors in the monsoon season when there's a landslide. So they deploy the machines immediately to clear the roads for the traffic, and so these are some of the things that we do. But we do not have much landslide in the settlement, and the most of the, as I said before, the most of the landslides are along the roads and highways. So that are some of the things. So there is no need for the relocation of the populations in the area of the Bhutan in case of the landslide. Thank you.
Can I continue?
Yes, please go ahead. Thank you, Yeshey. Yes, please go ahead, Lalrinpuii.
As for us, we have had not just one or two, we have had a number of communities in area where a huge landslide actually wipe out the entire neighborhood. So we have had a couple of those. And for that, in certain cases, the government has rehabilitated people in other places, which the government chose. And like we've said before, mitigation is really a long-term effort. And we will, and while we help in specific landslide mitigation, we work more on the policy side, and we are bringing in new regulations and enforcement. So that's how we work here.
Great. Okay, thank you very much, Lalrinpuii. Let's move on maybe to the next question. So what are the contributors to Bhutan being carbon negative? So this is a question for Yeshey.
Thank you. I think, most of the people will be very surprised when we say that we are carbon negative. So actually, it's a real in the country. One of the contributors to this carbon negative is like Bhutan's forest coverage is at the current situation is almost like 72% of the land is covered by the forest, and one of the main contributors to this is, as per our constitution of Bhutan, even in the constitution, the minimum of 60% of our land should be covered forest. So I should say the forest is the main contributor for this carbon negative in the country. And we even you see in the picture I've shown the capital city of Thimphu. The surrounding is all covered with forests. So even the capital city is with a lot of forests surrounding. So I should say we are evergreen in the region. So this is one of the main contributor to this carbon negative. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yeshey. Okay, let's move on to the next question. So 20 years ago, one of GeoHazards International's major activities was to train local builders to build low-cost shear walls for schools to better enable them to withstand earthquake shaking. What are examples of more recent technology transfer to local builders? Yeshey, perhaps you can talk a little bit about some of the work of training local manufacturers. It's not exactly builders, but maybe that'd be of interest, and you can add more as needed.
I'll just talk on a little on this.
Sure.
I think, yeah, we did a lot of local capacity development in the schools, especially, as I said before, the earthquake decks is one of the things that we took in Bhutan for the to withstand the falling hazards in the event of the earthquake shaking. And other than that, so we also do a lot of trainings on the earthquake features, like especially on the vulnerability assessments and also the assessment of the buildings in case of the earthquake, as well as after the earthquake or before the earthquake. So these are some of the things that we do a lot of in the transfer of the in the building of the capacity in the country. But I'm not sure. But the low cost share wall that for the schools in Bhutan, but we didn't we do not do these projects in Bhutan, so I'm not really able to share on this at the moment. But these are some of the things that we are doing. The earthquake decks is the one of the major that we are working on it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yeshey. And Lalrinpuii, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the trainings? And I mean, you talked a little bit during your presentation about some of the trainings for engineers and geologists, some of that technology transfer.
Yeah, sure. So local engineers were trained as local engineers, and geologists were trained as part of our field school in Aizawl. And that was also supported by the national government. And we brought in engineers from IITS to interact with local engineers. And our international geology experts from the United States and our national experts from India also came. And we had a hands-on field experience where we had in the morning we had theory classes, and in the afternoons we take them for practical classes to the field where our experts, engineers and geologists, they were taught specifically like in depth on what's what of all the things that they can do to build better resilience and work on mitigations.
Thank you both. I will only add that one of the methods that we try to incorporate as much as we can in our projects is to do as much as we can what we call learn by doing. And so it's kind of along the lines of technology transfer. The idea is that we're not just doing a training or or just one-time training, but we're engaging local professionals, local decision makers throughout an entire project or a specific program, so that they learn as they go and they're part of it. And so in a way, I think many ways that's some of the, I would say, almost most powerful ways of really having some technology transfer in that exchange, and having local stakeholders is a key part of the team. Okay, let's go on to the next question. What information or data are most lacking in your work that prevents you from advocating for more proactive resilience work?
Can I go first?
Sure.
Okay, so Aizawl is growing so fast that it is difficult to keep up. We try to keep pace with this with our efforts, and finally, it is to bring about behavior change, and a lot of connecting people to expertise from around the world, and imparting more knowledge to them.
Yeah.
That they can take forward themselves.
Thank you, Lalrinpuii. Yeshey, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think the data, the one thing that we lack in the community is the data sharing. So that was a big concern. So when we work for the scenarios and other works in the country, so getting the data and sharing data is one of the things that we are lacking in the community. That's not that people do not have the data, but something like so. Since we are very new in this field, so like the seismic, in case of earthquake data, so we do not have a seismic station long time ago. So it's a very new. So we need data collection from the long durations. So where we lack in our country. So these are some of the things that we have some. Mm, problems in taking up the projects, taking up the scenario in the realistic manner. But rather than that, but when we have a data, people share. So these are some of the good things that we are doing. So I should say we are trying our best in building up the data at the moment and working and taking the scenarios forward in the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yeshey. Lalrinpuii, do you want to add a little bit about the recent knowledge exchange for water infrastructure? Maybe that's a good example of sharing some lessons learned among people who've experienced earthquakes with water, and effects on water infrastructure, and having that exchange and kind of trying to anticipate that for hill cities in India.
Yes. Late last year, we had a project on with the government of Mizoram, the water supply department, which we call the knowledge exchange, in order to bring more resilience to the water supply system. So there we had the knowledge exchange with another hill city in India called Shimla, and our experts, our international experts, guided us on all that can happen when an earthquake or landslide struck water supply systems. And they also, they were also taught on what they can do and to mitigate before any of the disasters that can happen. That was as per the comments and the feedback we got from the department, the water supply department. They said that it was really helpful because they had not actually looked at their water supply system in that view before, and with the knowledge exchange they get to learn what exactly or how exactly their system will get damaged. So, and they also learn how to mitigate it now, and they said that they are eager to take more steps towards resiliency.
Thank you, Lalrinpuii, for adding that. Yeah, I think what we're hearing is that, many times it takes a big disaster to learn lessons, hard lessons, and many years. And so bringing in as much as we can of that knowledge of other parts of the world that have experienced this and who bring in that perspective and then think through how it pertains to local context is incredibly valuable. Thank you. Okay, great. Let's move on to the next question. So what an excellent session. Thanks for sharing these experiences and for doing the work you do. Why are solutions like slope stabilization and seismic retrofitting not taken up more widely by communities? Is it possible to make the current technologies simpler to a next level, and will it help?
Okay. Slope stabilization is mostly done by the government. So, and we do help in this field. Also for retrofitting, we have worked with several states in India and Nepal to promote retrofitting of critical infrastructures, including schools. So it's mostly left to the government to take the first steps.
Mm-hmm. Yeshey, do you want to add anything to that?
I think both the slope stabilization and the retrofitting, I think which is not widely taken up in the community. I know, especially in this region, Southeast region. One could be the people were not aware on the benefits of the retrofitting as well as the slope stabilization, which takes long time. Actually, it's a long-term term works that really needs to be embedded for the community. So, but in case of Bhutan, slope stabilization is taking up actually along the national highways, along the roadways in the country. So that's the good step that with the concerned agency, with the Department of Roads in Bhutan, we're doing their works on slope stabilization wherever there's a landslide in the area. In case of retrofitting, yeah, we did a few retrofitting in Bhutan, but as the question mentioned, it takes some time to widely understand, to give the awareness among the communities. So, but it is picking up even in Bhutan slowly and steadily. I think definitely for the structure which are very important, which we are not able to demolish or which we are not able to do do other measures. So retrofitting is the one measure. Being in the very culture oriented country, we have a lot of fortresses and a lot of very unique buildings in the country. So where we need a preservation. So that's the only way that we do the retrofitting. So these are some of the things that we are picking up in the country at the moment. But to simplify the technology in the retrofitting, I'm not sure. The safety is the first, I think. So I can't say that with coming up the technology, maybe we can maybe simplify the methods or the level. But at the current moment, the safety, we take a safety as a very first measure. So I think the comprehensive retrofitting should be taken up when we do the works in that field. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yeshey. And Anshu, thank you for that excellent question. I think it's a huge challenge that we face. And I'll just add that I think part of what we've learned, at least from what I'll say from my perspective, is that the issue, whether or not a technology is taken up widely by a community goes way beyond the technology itself. There's so many different factors affecting it in terms of, how much it costs, but also just like, how much people value it in terms of how much awareness is raised about the benefit that it brings. And even if you have, one great retrofitting program and then it's not continued, it may stop. And so I think one of the things that we really need to think about is that these are really long-term issues and they're changing, right? We have growing populations. That's what I was mentioning before. There's growing, you heard from Yeshey and Lalrinpuii, we have growing populations, we have changing hazards, we have a lot of different things changing. And we need to think about this as a long-term issue and start thinking about approaches that really take that into consideration. And I'll add to that, changes in government. I think that, to me, that was one of the first things when I came to GHI as president. I remember hearing Lalrinpuii talking about how she was talking with the new government, and she was talking to them about all the work that had been done so that we don't lose all that effort. And I thought that was really just had an effect on me in terms of I hadn't thought about how important that was. So it's not just about having one great program and then 5 years later you can have a change of decision makers, change of government, and then all of that can be discarded. So really thinking about it as a long-term approach and thinking about long-term efforts, I think is might be helpful for all of us as I think that's something that we're thinking about as well, is how do we encourage more adoption more widely of some of these measures. So we are over time. Thank you everyone so much for joining. I think there was maybe one more question, and Duku, very nice to see you. We will answer you via email. Thank you everyone for joining, and big thank you to our two speakers for sharing their perspectives, their insights, and their thoughts with us. And everyone have a nice day, a nice evening, a nice afternoon, and thanks again.